Hey folks, Kevin here. Well, it's May 21st, 2020, in the work area right now, and one of the questions I get often during the off season, during the winter and early spring is, well, how can you give us an update on how the trees are doing that you transplanted? Now, there's a whole bunch of trees that I transplanted this last fall, and there were a few trees that I had transplanted a year ago and 2 years ago. And so questions about those trees, how they did. So a couple of crabapple trees that I transplanted, an oak tree, lots of plum, peaches, apples, and what else did I do? Some red buds, and I can't think of the rest right now. So many of the trees are starting to leaf out right now. The English walnuts, they aren't leafed out yet. But what I thought I'd do is put the helmet cam on with the GoPro mounted to it and take you up and have a look at these trees. Hopefully the images will come out okay, I'm not sure. Another question I've had about the curly willow. So the curly willow was probably May of 2019. I posted a video on doing hardwood cuttings and creating a living fence, a visual barrier between my neighbors on the eastern side of the property and our property. So I took lots of cuttings from curly willow trees, and those cuttings I planted all along the property borderline. And unfortunately, because it's in the woods, none of them survived, or at least the ones that I checked on didn't survive. When you scratch it, even though they haven't leafed out yet, when you scratch the outer bark off and look at it to see if there's any green there, they all died. So the curly willows weren't a success, and so one of the things I learned about those, they do need sun exposure. They had the right soil type, it's pretty moist in that environment, and curly willows really like the moisture, but they did not get much sunshine. Now at that same time, when I did those curly willow hardwood cuttings, and there were anything from my thumb thickness to my pinky thickness in diameter, that I poked holes in the ground, stuck them in the ground, and unfortunately, like I say, they didn't do well. However, I did cut off some limbs that were probably a couple inches in diameter, and I stuck them on the western side of the property just to see would they take off and would they leaf out, and indeed they did do. So I thought what I'd do, throw the GoPro camera helmet cam on, and we'll go take a look at a few of these things, so at least you got an idea, an update on what was successful thus far in the season, because some trees haven't leafed out yet, and what really wasn't successful. So here we go. Okay, so I'm over here by pond 5 in front of me, and this is the curly willow tree that I originally took a lot of limbs off, and all of the small limbs that I had gone ahead and put into the woods, they didn't survive. However, there are some chunkier pieces that have a couple inch in diameter that I stuck in, and so here's one right here. Here's an interesting thing. Most of the leaves that come out and the buds that come out, even if they come out on eastern or western side of it, they all tend to go, even if they come out on the yes, either the north or south side of it, they all tend to basically be on the side of the east, because we get the strong winds out of the west. So this is the windy part of the property. So here's two more, and you could see the buds that start to emerge on this side, they all tend to die off. Hopefully this is all showing up. And you can see the buds down here. These ones will take off because there's more wind resistance down below. So all along on this side is what happens. So that's one of the easy ways of seeing if you live in a real windy zone, whether the trees are leaning, like this black locust here. So this tree is actually leaning towards the east, and all of these 1-year-old stems that are coming out are all facing towards the east, indicating that the winds come out of the west. So this is a stone wall right beneath here. I've been putting soil on top of it, but I took 3 of these large sticks or branches that were cut off, and I just stuck them into the ground here at this point. So how can I get a uniform? I'll come over to this one over here. The trick to getting the tree to get a nice, beautiful, full canopy, similar to this one here. One second. To this one here, even though the limbs all tend to go somewhat towards the east, you could see these ones here, they come out on the west side, but they end up getting bent towards the east, but more of them come out on the west side. So what I can do is I can just go ahead and choose one of these, and I could choose this one here and just cut it off here on an angle and peel off all these other buds, and this one will ultimately, it'll get apical dominance, it'll shoot up more this season and get stronger and healthier, become much more robust, thicker than this one here, and then it'll send out the limbs all over. I can show you that on a sassafras right over there. One second. So I'm over here by pond 4 right now, and this is a sassafras tree. And when you dig one of these up or cut them up or strip the bark off a little bit, you know you're dealing with a sassafras because it smells like root beer. So this tree was a tree that I transplanted 3 years ago, and the original caliper, the original diameter was about 2 inches, and I don't know if you could see that where I'm pointing now, but that's where it was originally, and all of the limbs going up from here were all headed towards the eastern side of the property. So what I ended up doing was cutting that off, pruning off all the light ones that were down low, and I left one main one. Now I just pruned this one the other day, but as you can see, even though this is in a high wind zone, this one balanced out pretty nicely. So there are ways of getting the tree to balance out a little bit better, but we'll go and look now at a couple of trees that are challenging, trying to get them to balance out. Okay, I'm up here by pond 2. That's pond 2 right there. The house and the garden areas are all down in that location. And this is one of the, this is an English oak that's grafted onto a black walnut here. This one I transplanted last fall. Which one? Oh, there's a label on it. So this is a champion English walnut. And you can see the buds aren't open yet, but they are starting to emerge some. This is a black walnut that I transplanted, and you can see the buds are just starting to open. Hopefully you can see these. And so I put this one over here. This is one that I'll graft and put one of the English walnuts on. This is an oak tree that it was either real early in the spring last year or the fall before. This is one of the oak trees that were, as I was clearing down there, clearing all the dead ash out and all, I found this one that was too close to another tree that had to come out. So I went ahead, dug down. This taproot got bent a little bit, but it ended up doing very well. This is a dogwood. I just scraped the outer bark, and that's real simple. So what I can do is just go ahead and use your knife and just scratch it a little bit, and hopefully you could see that little bit of green there. And so that's a cambium layer. That's where the xylem and phloem are. So the fluids for transpiration, photosynthesis, after photosynthesis, taking the carbon dioxide and making carbohydrates and sending it down into the root systems down below. So I've got to prune this one yet, but that's a nice looking dogwood. This burning bush I did. This is one, that crimson maple there, I've got some dead main limbs on this one, but a lot of the root is still intact, so I've got to do some pruning on this one. Two of the crab apples that people had asked about that I transplanted, this one was over by pond 1, and it was in a dark, really wet location, and this was 2 years ago. I transplanted it over here. I did lose one limb, well, 2 limbs. These 2 limbs here I think were associated with one of the roots that got heavily damaged when I was digging it up. But this one will, you know, this is, you know, these crab apples, boy, their limbs cross all the time and all. I'll try to prune out some of the ones that do some rubbing, have danger of rubbing and doing damage to each other. But I've got some more pruning to do on this. I just pruned off that dead limb. This is another one of the crab apples that I transplanted last fall, and it turned out really well. These ones that I pruned here, I didn't prune them because they were injured at all. They actually were going in the same direction. So this one, when this one was first planted, this was planted just a little bit twisted like this. That whole direction was east. That's actually east over in this way, this direction here. But I should have turned it around to help it some, but I may end up pruning off a couple more of these limbs so that I can get a more full pattern out of this tree. Let's go over into an area in the second food forest that I transplanted a few fruit trees as well. So I'll do a complete overview of this second food forest. This whole area here that we're looking at is all second food forest. And one of the things I decided to do was to make all of my slopes more gradual going down here. And I did have a whole row of trees, fruit trees, and a few nut trees going right down here parallel with this, but it was too steep of a grade. And you could see what the soil looks more like, more gravel down in here. There's still some topsoil on top of this, but it really gets really bony. So I moved a lot of this soil up in there next to the hazelnuts, and I'll go over those in another video. We'll go over to just a couple of the fruit trees that I transplanted over here. And I did make a video last fall about changing the slope over here. And I'll talk more about this. Hopefully tomorrow I'll make the video. There's one of my neighbors coming by. But these are all, this is an apple tree right here that I went ahead and transplanted last fall. This is a red bud here that I transplanted last fall. This is another apple tree that I transplanted last fall. I think that's a persimmons there. A persimmons, most likely. A pear tree here, an apple tree here. This is a butternut, I believe, right here. No, I'm sorry, this is a pecan. So we've got a few pecans in here. That's another pecan. There's more down there. That tree I transplanted this fall, that one there. So with the benefit of the mini excavator, even the nut trees that have these deep tap roots can be successfully transplanted. after the leaves have fallen off, and almost doing them as bare root. A lot of these I left very little soil on the system, and then I just carefully made sure I brought it up to the ground level that it's ultimately going to be at, and that'll get extended all the way out in this area, this whole area as well. So we'll go over these this part of the second food forest in a video. Hopefully tomorrow I'll get to that. Okay, I'm up here now in the third food forest area, and right over there is a location where we do our large composting series. So everything, the second food forest is down in that location on the more eastern side of the property, west of the driveway. And this whole area up in here is the third food forest area. So along in here I've got black currants, which really tolerate the walnut trees very well. I'll have to see. So there's persimmons in this tree. This is one of my English walnuts. Now this was one that was a real challenge. As you can see, it's quite a large tree, and I contemplated removing this limb last fall, and I probably should have, because I may have cost this tree its life. Let's go ahead and see. This is concerning here. Oh no, we've got green. I don't know if you could see it. So the cambium layer here is still good. I may opt to do some pretty heavy pruning on this one still, because I may be taxing this tree quite a bit. So if the roots, if the root system, if all the lateral roots that are going to do all the nutrient and water absorption from the soil aren't adequate to support all of the foliage that's going to come out on this canopy, then through the process, the excessive transpiration tends up depleting it exceeds the capacity of the root systems. And there's still time to do some heavy pruning on this one, and as I'm thinking about it now, I will. So we've got black currants all along in here. I've got what else do I have here? I have Jerusalem artichokes all along in here as well. So it's persimmons, walnut, I'm sorry, persimmons, walnut, persimmons, walnut. This is a black walnut. Another persimmons here. Here's one of the black currants here. There's another black walnut. Another persimmons here. This is another English walnut, and I may do some more pruning on this one as well. Another persimmons here, and another black walnut right here. So we'll end up seeing just how successful everything that we've done with the transplanting of all these trees. All of the fruit trees are doing excellent. And all of these trees that are in the third food forest have all been transplanted as well, but that was done last year. And we'll take a look at this whole area in another video to come. Well, that's a quick run around on the property, looking at some of the trees that we have successfully transplanted, and of course the transplant location is really important. Something that's pretty obvious after looking at the new growth on those curly willows or corkscrew willows. You can see just how much the wind affects those buds as they emerge. Some of them get damaged on the west side in a real high wind zone, and those on the north and south side all tend to curl and are deflected, so that they end up to be more eastern. And as I showed you with the sassafras tree, that was also along the western property line. And by cutting that one off and using one of those limbs as one of the new growth limbs as the main structure, the rest of the tree healed around the main stalk, and created a nice rounded foliage with a pretty nice canopy. So I'm going to try that with those corkscrew or curly willows. The big challenge is, you know, last fall I talked about transplanting all of those walnut trees. So all our nut trees have a very long taproot, and there are laterals that come out from that taproot. But it's really important to try and get that taproot intact, or even if it's damaged some, trying to get the whole taproot out for the successful transplant of the tree. And I think it's really essential to do it when the leaves are off of the tree, after the leaves have fallen in the fall. Those are two really important aspects. The amount of soil that's retained on these nut trees isn't really all that important. Lots of the small lateral roots get damaged, and that's what I think I need to do some more pruning on those English walnuts. It looks like all the black walnuts are going to do fine because they weren't as developed as the English walnuts were. So that's one of the things I need to do, because once they leaf out, the demand for those leaves is going to exceed the root's capacity. The rest of the fruit trees, once they go dormant, getting those positioned properly and planning for the earth to settle when I'm designing these more gradual slope systems and using lots and lots of wood chips. Now, if you didn't see the video last fall when I was doing it, those trees aren't buried just in wood chips. They're buried in compost soil that's mounded up, and then the wood chips are brought up to the margins of that area as well. And lots of companion plants will be planted in those areas as well. So by having the deep wood chips, that's going to settle significantly. So there'll be little dips in between each one of these trees later on. So that's something I always have to make sure that I have adequate spacing between all the trees that I transplant, so that I can get whatever piece of equipment I'm using in between those to dump wood chips or to plant perennials as well, to make it more easily maintainable in the future. And that's one of the challenges or the lessons I learned from the first food forest, putting in that system as well. So I will create a video on the second food forest, and I think that's about it. So if you have any comments or questions, please leave them below. You can always, if you're interested in finding out, geez, when we did these things, just go back and look for transplanting walnut trees or whatever it may be, the ones that I talked about, or the oak tree. You're searching on the channel, it'll bring up the video associated with that tree that I showed you today. If you found this video of value, please give us a thumbs up, share it with your friends. I'm feeling better, the sun is out, it's warmer now, really beneficial for feeling more energetic and all. And I hope you all stay safe and healthy and take good care of yourselves, keep social distancing, do all you can to protect yourself and your loved ones. Thanks so much for watching, folks, and have a great day. Bye-bye now.